Have you ever wondered why some people seem to get away with atrocities while others pay dearly for much smaller mistakes? Carl Jung believed that there is an invisible law, prior to any human court, that never fails: psychic justice. For him, every transgression against one's own essence or against the human spirit creates a debt, and that debt will be collected, sooner or later, with relentless precision. The first unforgivable sin is the betrayal of one's own soul. Every human being carries an inner voice that distinguishes what is true from what is convenient. It is the spark of authenticity that calls us to real life. When we ignore that voice, selling our spirit for approval, power, or comfort, we open the first crack in our soul. These small concessions become habits: accepting toxic relationships for fear of loneliness, choosing lies because they are easier than the truth, sacrificing one's vocation in the name of money. The result is not only emptiness but the silent collapse of identity. Jung observed patients who seemed to have everything: prestige, wealth, success, but confessed to feeling dead inside. It was not depression, but sickness of the soul. The unconscious, incapable of being deceived, took its toll. Sabotage, inexplicable crises, bad choices, accidents that seemed like fate. The shadow, ignored, began its revenge. And justice is not limited to the inner self. The consequences spread throughout practical life. The businessman who denies his vocation loses everything in an unexpected collapse. The politician who betrays his values realizes that the power he has gained is hollow. The individual who chooses to lie discovers that even his victories taste like defeat. Punishment does not come from outside, but from the very distancing from inner truth. This is the point of origin of all other sins. When the soul is betrayed, one loses one's way and everything becomes justifiable. Corrupting the innocence of others, manipulating the vulnerable, inflating pride, denying the shadow, destroying hope. What begins as an intimate concession ends as collective destruction. The betrayal of the soul, therefore, is the foundation upon which all other downfalls are built. Because, when we lose touch with what is authentic, we cease to be guided by truth and begin to be dragged along by blind forces. Without this connection, life ceases to be creation and becomes mechanical repetition, a constant escape from oneself. Jung claimed that this is the worst condemnation, not needing external executioners, because the tormentor already lives within. The individual who betrays their own soul carries with them the cruelest of prisons, always being at war with themselves, without ever being able to escape. There is a sacred quality in human beings that Carl Jung understood as something pure and untouchable: innocence. This is not the naivety that is unaware of evil, but that deep purity that believes in good, that trusts, that still sees beauty where others see only ashes. This innocence is a divine spark, and when someone destroys it, they not only hurt an individual, but alter the spiritual balance of the world. Children carry this light naturally, but it also dwells in adults who have not allowed the harshness of life to turn them into cynics. These are the people who walk into a room and light it up just by their very presence. Their hope, kindness, and trust remind everyone that life can be less hostile. However, precisely for this reason, they become targets for those who have lost this purity. Some, unable to bear the memory of what they once had and lost, feel provoked by innocence. Others, corroded by bitterness and resentment, find pleasure in corrupting what they can no longer live. It is at this point that one of the unforgivable sins before cosmic justice occurs: the deliberate destruction of innocence. This destruction manifests itself in countless ways. The adult who exposes the child to what they should not yet know. The friend or partner who brutally betrays the trust placed in them. The cynic who, by mocking dreams and hopes, silently erases someone's faith in the future. Each gesture of this kind not only marks a person, it plants seeds of fear and mistrust that can last for generations. Jung saw this as one of the most serious transgressions because innocence is a direct connection to the divine. By erasing it, you not only hurt, but you take away a portion of light from the world. And the universe takes note. Compensation comes in precise ways. Often, those who destroy innocence see their own children, Grandchildren or loved ones go through the same collapse of trust. The teacher who humiliated a student may watch his own child be belittled by another. The spouse who betrayed their partner's trust finds themselves in a world where no one else is trustworthy. It is the relentless justice of the collective unconscious. You must experience firsthand what you made the other person feel. But perhaps the cruelest punishment does not come from outside. It grows from within. Little by little, those who destroy innocence lose the ability to be enchanted by life. The sunset is no longer beautiful. It becomes just light and atmospheric particles. A child's laughter becomes noise. Love turns into chemical manipulation. Everything becomes gray, without mystery, without magic. And yet, the memory of once having trusted, of once having believed, never completely fades away. In the silence of the night, it returns like a ghost, because what has been lost cannot be restored, and longing for what is gone is the most painful memory. Those who corrupt innocence are left to live in an emotional and spiritual desert, surrounded by people as cynical and broken as themselves. They become incapable of loving, of trusting, of seeing beauty. The destruction they have projected onto the world turns against them, transforming them into caricatures of what they hated. And it is precisely at this point that divine justice shows its most severe face. When you destroy innocence in another, you also destroy the last possibility of recognizing it in yourself. But that is not the end. The next step in human decline is even more brutal. If here we speak of stolen innocence, in the next chapter we will delve into something even darker: the cruel manipulation of the vulnerable. Some human beings are born or find themselves in conditions of extreme fragility. Children who blindly trust every adult. Elderly people whose lucidity fades, forcing them to depend on the help of strangers. People in mourning, so devastated that they would accept any promise of relief. Individuals with physical or mental limitations who need constant support to get through life. These are the vulnerable, and Jung perceived a terrible shadow. There are those who, instead of protecting, are attracted to fragility like predators to wounded prey. For them, pain does not arouse compassion, but opportunity. Suffering becomes profit. Trust becomes currency. Naivety is transformed into a loophole for domination. The false healer who promises an unattainable cure. The advisor who induces the elderly to hand over their retirement savings in fraudulent schemes. The partner who approaches someone devastated by pain, only to suck their energy. All represent variations of the same transgression, using another being's most delicate moment as a stage for exploitation. The gravity of this sin lies not only in the act itself, but in the trust that has been violated. Children need to trust in order to survive. The elderly need to trust in order to carry on. Those who are grieving need to trust in order to rebuild themselves. When that trust is betrayed, it is not just one person who is hurt. It is the very order of life that is corrupted. The force that should protect becomes violence. Manipulators make excuses. They call their victims naive. They claim to be teaching lessons. They repeat that that's how the world is. But the universe is not impressed by justifications. It records intentions. And when someone chooses to exploit vulnerability, a debt is recorded in the collective unconscious that will demand balance. Cosmic justice often manifests itself through role reversal. The manipulator ends up fragile, sick, old, or dependent. Then they realize they can't trust anyone because they spent their life sowing coldness and mistrust. Their cry for help is met with silence. Loneliness becomes an inevitable sentence. In other cases, compensation is fulfilled through children. The father who built his fortune by deceiving the vulnerable watches his son being deceived using identical methods. The businessman who profited from exploiting the elderly sees his own parents lose everything in similar scams. It is life returning the image in the mirror with relentless precision. But perhaps the cruelest punishment does not come from outside, but from within. Those who exploit the vulnerable gradually lose the ability to build true bonds. Every gesture becomes calculated, every word a strategy. Loving becomes impossible because every act of devotion seems suspicious. This mistrust becomes an invisible prison, suffocating any possibility of intimacy. Some try to compensate with theatrical philanthropy, public donations, campaigns, speeches of kindness. But the unconscious, that secret accountant of the soul, is not fooled. It weighs the tears shed, the dreams destroyed, the years reduced to dust. The victims, in turn, carry scars that do not heal. The child who trusted the wrong adult grows up afraid. The deceived elderly person spends their last days in bitter distrust. The exploited mourner learns not to ask for help anymore, perpetuating the cycle of loneliness. Each wound generates waves of pain that span generations, and when they finally want to experience true relationships, it is too late. The manipulator discovers that they no longer know how to trust. The desert they sowed in others now blooms within themselves. This is the final justice: to reap the emptiness they planted. Pride may seem like a virtue, feeling satisfaction at work, recognizing achievements, celebrating efforts. But Jung identified its dark side, the one that does not build, but corrodes. Excessive pride creates the illusion of superiority and an almost total blindness to reality. Under its influence, the other ceases to be human. They are seen as a threat to greatness or as a tool to sustain it. In this state, people lose the ability to learn because they believe they already know everything. They refuse help when they need it most, because accepting it would be admitting failure. They persist in failed strategies just to avoid acknowledging mistakes. Extreme pride does not build identity, but walls, and walls isolate as much as they protect. This blindness also turns to one's own weaknesses. Everyone sees them, except the proud person. Every criticism is interpreted as envy, every failure as injustice, every piece of advice as an affront. A narrative of persecution is created that distances them even further from the truth. Jung observed that this pride often arises as compensation for deep insecurities. Those who present themselves as invincible usually carry an unbearable emptiness. Arrogance is not firmness, but a fragile defense against fears that have never been faced. Cosmic justice in these cases manifests itself poetically. Pride always precedes the fall, not by chance, but by balance. If it came from intelligence, life creates situations in which the person is ridiculed. If it came from appearance, time imposes relentless marks. If it came from success, collapse comes at the height of confidence. The fall is always surgical, targeting the sustained illusion. Usually the blow comes when the proud believe they are untouchable. The boastful businessman sees his empire crumble. The father who flaunted his perfect family faces public scandal. The politician who claimed to be incorruptible is unmasked. The irony of justice is that the unmasking happens at the moment when applause seemed guaranteed. But the most devastating punishment is internal. When the mask falls, the person discovers that they have not built a real identity, only a facade. The distance between who they believed themselves to be and who they really are becomes unbearable. Pride did not allow for solid roots, true bonds, or consistent values. The castle crumbles and reveals emptiness. Social reaction multiplies the pain. Those treated with contempt rarely offer compassion. The proud person discovers that they have burned all the bridges that could support them. Some try to rebuild their pedestal. They throw themselves into projects, seek to regain prestige, and cry out for recognition. But the attempt sounds desperate and fails. Other times, justice is served within the family. Children who bring shame, secrets revealed, mistakes repeated. The cruelest aspect is that pride prevents learning. Even in the face of ruin, many prefer to insist on the charade. Thus, justice repeats falls until humility is accepted. For some, this never happens. They die as tragic examples, symbols of the price of unbridled arrogance. But for the few who embrace humiliation as liberation, there is rebirth. They discover that the fall was not destruction but an invitation. They leave behind the exhaustion of sustaining false images and open themselves to genuine bonds. They exchange superiority for humility and finally find authenticity. Every human being carries a shadow within them. It is not pure evil but the sum of rejected parts. Thoughts that cause shame, desires that do not fit with one's public image, feelings that seem unacceptable. Jung understood that the shadow is inseparable from the human condition. Denying it does not destroy it, it only pushes it into the underground of the psyche, where it grows silently, gaining strength. From an early age, we learn to hide traits that our environment condemns. The family represses anger, and the child learns to smile while accumulating frustration. The community values only altruism, and natural selfishness is buried. Religion demonizes certain desires and they are locked away in the unconscious. But what is rejected does not disappear. It becomes compressed energy that escapes in distorted forms. Individuals who do not admit to aggression become passive-aggressive. Those who deny vanity become obsessive critics of others' appearances. Those who deny fear compensate with reckless acts. Their whole life becomes a performance. The authentic self is replaced by a carefully designed mask. Sustaining this theater consumes vitality and blocks creativity. The soul is divided in two: the public persona and the hidden figure that throbs deep inside. Jung warned that rejecting the shadow creates dangerous distortions. Many become fanatics of the virtue they pretend to possess. Those who do not admit cruel thoughts become exaggeratedly kind, but in an artificial way. Those who do not accept envy become compulsive defenders of justice, but without compassion. Excess precisely reveals repression. Cosmic justice in this case is not sudden but constant. The universe forces the individual to confront their shadow through external mirrors. Those who deny their own falsehood attract liars. Those who reject dependence attract needy people. Those who refuse cruelty become the target of others' cruelty. It is no coincidence. It is the unconscious demanding balance. Over time, projection emerges. What we cannot bear to see in ourselves, we see in everything else. We create enemies around every corner. The whole world seems threatening, when in fact it reflects internal battles. Constant criticism of others reveals what has been buried inside. The result is isolation, mistrust, and an eternal war against personal ghosts. The shadow also sabotages silently. The worker obsessed with discipline creates mistakes that destroy their projects. The peaceful person who denies anger sabotages relationships with passive resistance. And at certain moments, the pressure is so great that the shadow explodes. Years of self-control collapse in seconds, revealing a face that the individual themselves does not recognize. These explosions usually happen in critical situations, amplifying the destruction. The most tragic thing about repression is that it eliminates not only the negative, but also hidden potential. Anger contains energy to impose limits. Selfishness holds the key to self-care. Desire can be a source of creation. To deny the shadow is to amputate parts of the soul. Justice inevitably requires integration. At some point, through crises, losses, or collapses, the individual is forced to look at themselves and admit what they have tried to hide. This confrontation is painful, but it is the only path to authenticity. Integrating the shadow does not mean giving into it, but recognizing it, giving it form and direction. Those who face this process discover something extraordinary. When accepted, the shadow ceases to be an enemy and becomes a source of strength. Those who go through this journey emerge more human, more compassionate, more capable of love. For only those who have recognized their own darkness can welcome the darkness of others without judgment. For those who insist on denying it to the end, a life of internal warfare remains. A battlefield where no external victory brings peace. They become strangers to themselves, unable to rest, because half of their soul remains imprisoned in the basement. Hope is perhaps the most precious thing a human being can carry. It is not naive optimism, but the inner strength that allows us to endure the longest night, believing that dawn will come. It is what sustains courage in despair, what feeds faith in the face of the impossible, what gives meaning to effort even when all seems lost. Jung understood that hope is a direct connection to that which transcends us. It is rooted in the conviction that life has purpose, that suffering is not the end but a passage. Therefore, destroying someone's hope is not only a personal cruelty, it is a crime against the very essence that sustains life. This destruction takes many forms. Sometimes it is the father who tells his son that he will never amount to anything, amputating dreams before they are even born. Other times it is the doctor who communicates an illness with such coldness that it kills not only the strength of the body, but the will to fight. It may be the partner who swears love in moments of weakness, only to abandon when the need arises. But the darkest side is when this is done consciously, almost like a ritual of power, convincing someone that it's not worth trying, that nothing will ever work out, that giving up is the only way. These people feed off the collapse of others. They take pleasure in seeing the light go out in the eyes of those who believed. They experience a sense of power when they manage to make someone give up on their dreams. They justify their cruelty with the discourse of realism, saying that they are opening the eyes of the naive, that they are only preventing future suffering. But the truth is more bitter. They attack hope because they no longer have any themselves. There is no more devastating sin, because when you destroy hope, you take away not just a momentary emotion, but an axis of meaning. Without it, the individual loses the reason to get up in the morning, the energy to continue, the faith that pain can be transformed into something greater. Cosmic justice for this crime is precise and inevitable. Those who destroy the hope of others will sooner or later find themselves in a situation where they desperately need encouragement. But they will discover that their reputation as destroyers has isolated them. At the moment when they most need a word of inspiration, they receive only silence. Their own history condemns them. Often, compensation comes in the form of what hurts the most: one's own offspring. The father who crushed his son's dreams discovers that this same son grows up weak, prone to depression, unable to believe in himself. The teacher who insisted on bringing them back to reality sees former students living far below their potential. The cycle of hopelessness spreads invisible roots, robbing not only one person but the entire community of what could have blossomed. Victims, even if they rebuild their lives, carry eternal scars. The artist who gave up too soon will always remember the phrase that hurt him. The inventor who abandoned his research will know that the world may have lost something valuable because of a poisonous word. This kind of pain does not fade away. It turns into longing for a life that could have been. And the cruelest irony is that the destroyer of hope ends up a hostage to himself. Living only on pessimism, he loses the ability to see any possibility of change. The mind becomes a prison, where every new path seems threatening, every opportunity sounds like a trap, every promise is a lie. Relationships become fragile, because loving requires believing in transformation, and without hope, there is no room for love. In old age, many are tormented by the ghost of regret. They remember the moments when they could have given support, but chose to crush. They relive the scenes where they could have been a beacon, but preferred to be a storm. The weight of conscience, accumulated over decades, becomes a punishment greater than any external punishment. Jung saw this destruction as an unforgivable sin because it reduces humanity's own horizon. Every time someone takes away another's hope, they make the world narrower, less creative, poorer in possibilities. It is as if they were erasing a star from the collective sky, and those who erase stars sooner or later find themselves condemned to wander in darkness. Life, however, still offers choice. We are not forced to repeat the cycle. We can be those who lift up instead of crushing, who protect instead of corrupting, who rekindle hope in the eyes of those who have almost given up. The responsibility is immense, but also liberating. For in the end, true greatness lies only in helping another human being to continue believing. If this text spoke to you, remember, hope is not destroyed, it is cultivated. Enjoy the video, subscribe to the channel, and consider leaving a donation of any amount so that this message continues to echo. Write in the comments a word that represents your commitment to life, light, strength, or hope.